Breeze. Okay. That's a saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to go ahead and call this work session to order, our last work session for 2024. And I want to thank staff for being here and also the guests who are here. We started, if you would please join me to say for the good.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. And I understand this is an important work, but I have to get the orders that we need to be out here by 5. So it's like 45 minutes max of each item. So we can get that done. We'll go ahead and move in.
Well, should we hold questions then to the end, or how do you want to do that to maximize
Depends on the
efficiency?
presenter, how you want to handle it.
So we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll move right to you, Mr. Clerk. Thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, we're going to focus on 2 topics. So we're going to focus on resident advisory boards, and we're going to split it up into 2 parts. So we'll do our administrative policies and governance structure kind of discussion, and then we'll talk about the roles and responsibilities of each board individually, and then we'll move into our social district discussion. As for the resident advisory board, again, we'll split it up into 2 parts. So we'll talk about administrative policy first, and then we'll go into each board next. Okay. So we've got the who, what, when, and why. We're not covering the where because we are here. We're in APEX. So that's not necessary that we do that now. We're going to talk about, again, part 1, some administrative policies and recommendations. These are things that have come up over the last several years that really we've not got clear guidance and teeth to pull from. So we'll look at some of those. And then we've got our current scope and responsibilities as well as some proposed options. And then we'll talk about next steps. Just to kind of let kind of a framework and set some framework and some guidelines. This is a brainstorming session. So anything that's discussed and thrown out will come back to you all. So if it's a UDO amendment, it'll come back to you through a UDO amendment. If it's an ordinance amendment, it'll come back to you through an ordinance amendment. If it's an administrative policy recommendation, you'll give us that guidance at this work session, and then you'll see that come back at a regular council meeting for adoption.
Alan, you said come up as far as this topic. Is this council requested? Is this from you guys when you've been doing your talking to the committees, or how's it come up for today's thing? Okay.
I think that some of your colleagues have kind of wanted to have this discussion.
Okay.
And then some of the advisory boards have wanted this to come up because they're kind of in this phase now where they're not really sure what their role and responsibilities are. Some of our advisory boards were established for a set purpose, for a set reason at a given time. They've accomplished that task. It was very task-oriented or task-driven. And once they've done that, now they've kind of checked the box and they need some additional guidance as to what to do next. So I would say
Thank you.
So this is not an uncommon practice. As you know, across most all states within the U.S., you will see appointed advisory boards. These are a great way for our residents to engage. It's a great way to get their feedback, get their input in their local government. As you can see, we have 9 resident advisory boards. 2 are statutorily required, being the Planning Board and the Board of Adjustment, and the others are established by you all. It's either been done through a resolution, an ordinance, etc. And if you look back, again, it was for a specific task, a specific purpose at a specific time. And so now we just need to kind of talk through what some of that looks like.
Okay, question again on this one. I read through a lot of stuff, so I had questions at certain times. So you divide it between the required ones versus ones that we did that are not required. Have you thought about, and as I was looking through, I was thinking about the difference between ones that the staff does not have the expertise to advise us, and the residents who have a lot of knowledge are the ones advising, and ones where the staff maybe does, and it would be much more of a prioritization than looking for outside advice. And I was trying to think about those 2 things because I think the purpose would be really different between those 2 kinds of boards, and it's changed over time, I think, in some of these as well.
It has. Do you have one in mind that staff would not have the expertise in?
The Arts Committee, I would think. Sorry, Taylor, but I would think that we have a lot of artists on that committee that know more about art than I think I do, and a lot of people maybe on the staff would. And the one I know maybe best is the transit one, the environmental one. Those we have, I think, really, especially transit, really strong staff that knows a lot more about transit than maybe anybody on that committee does. And it's more informing them and less about them bringing ideas from the outside. And there's probably a spectrum of the other ones there. But I'm not sure if that's how you guys see it or not.
Kind of yes and no. I think really what we need is direction on what do you expect from these boards and what do you expect them to do? When you look at the end of the year, how do you expect to measure their success? You know, if you're expecting them to bring policy recommendations and other sort of guidance for you all to consider, then that needs to be said at this conversation. And if there are certain things, like you'll see some of the advisory boards, the incentive zoning policy, the environmental zoning conditions that are included in the rezoning application, those are things that were set out at the direction of you all. And so that now that they've been checked off as an assignment, do you still need the board? If so, what should they be working on? What do you expect to see from them?
Okay, thank you.
Are we getting a little bit ahead in the presentation, or do you want to comment on this right now?
We'll give up that. We're gonna come up. And then, so we always like to reference a reputable source, because UNC School of Government recommends that these appointed boards be reviewed on a regular or routine basis for applicability, for effectiveness, et cetera. So again, this is just the beginning. This is an opportunity for us to kind of talk through what each of our advisory boards are doing now, how they're set up, and how we can maybe provide some clarity in their roles and responsibilities. And I will pass it off to Ashley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have conducted some research over the past couple of years, and what we've learned, what would be beneficial to staff is creating an advisory handbook. But what we have surveyed is, we surveyed our neighboring municipalities and counties, so from large to small, which consists of Raleigh, Holly Springs, Garner. So we asked all these questions, and then we also met with the staff liaisons and department directors. What is it that you're missing? What is it that you need from the advisory standpoint? We also included the chair and vice chair meetings to capture their input. So with our research, we did come up with some key themes that were identified, and that were some unclear roles and responsibilities on some advisory boards. So also a lack of consistent practices for reporting and success metrics, and also opportunities to improve communication and alignment between the board and the town council. Okay, so administrative policy recommendation. So these are some recommendations that we, from our research, that we are presenting to you. So we currently do not have attendance guidance, clarification on stipend, membership. You know, our memberships are not consistent throughout all of our advisory boards, neither are term lengths. So this brings up our some talking points to accountability, consistency, and transparency across all the boards. So to recap some of the recommendations, when we did our research, so attendance, you know, we're recommending missing 3 consecutive meetings, which is 25%. Over 12-month periods, having quarterly reports to the elected body. All boards eligible for a $50 stipend. Term lengths, 2-year terms or 3-year terms with a maximum of 6-year maximum consecutive service. Diversity. So put an emphasis on appointing members who represent the ethnic, cultural, and demographic diversity community of Apex. So as well as eligibility of introducing youth representatives, which is new, and establishing that you must be 18 years of age, with the exception of the youth represented, and that consists of high school or up. And also, all members must be current on their town and county taxes. This is also in alignment with what other communities are doing as well. Resignations. Currently, members are advisory board members do not have a specific guideline to go by on resignation. They either tell their staff liaison or by email or by voice. So establishing something in written with an effective date to the clerk's office. Meeting minutes. Back in August, the meeting minutes for advisory boards was transitioned back to the clerk's office. So this is geared towards alleviating the staff liaisons and have more focus while they're in their meetings with their advisory board members. And also keeping meeting minute structure more consistent across the town with our town council meeting minutes and along with our advisory board minutes, keeping everything consistent. And lastly is the required training. Implement a ethics and conflicts of interest training for each term. Required for each term.
Can I ask questions or react to these, or do you, like, when do you want guidance on this? Like, is this a good time to
Good.
Go through one more slide,
Oh.
and then we'll go back. That'll be part one.
Okay. And so this is something new that we would like to implement as well, a recommendation of the annual report. Okay, so this is going to consist of what has the board been working on the past year? What are they proposing in the next year? Is it aligning with our town strategic goals? And are there any resources that you need for that board? What can we give you to pursue any upcoming plans? So this, again, this is an annual attendance report and also an annual attendance report included in that. This will be presented by the chair of the advisory board. Clarifying membership, corporate limits, as well as including youth representatives on our resident boards, including them in voting. All positions will be voting, and no staff shall serve as an ex officio.
Bill Arno.
Okay, can I?
Yeah.
You can ask.
All right, can we go back to the previous slide, please? So I like the idea of attendance requirements. So when it comes to attendance requirements and the term lengths and resignations, resignation is probably the most clear. Somebody resigns their position and gives an effective date. Right now, there's some boards where even though term has expired, the sitting member continues to serve until a new member has been appointed. Are we proposing that upon term, end of the term, there's an automatic dismissal, like you are appointed until December 31st, 2024, and as January 1st, you are no longer on the board?
You get me? Okay. So we've talked about this. So one of the things that we've talked about is 90 days prior to a term expiring, we'll be reaching out to the members to say, hey, your term expires. If it's December 30th, then sometime in September, we'll be reaching out to them to say, hey, you're in your last 3 months, your last 90 days. Are you interested in continuing to serve? If so, update your application so we can get this before the term expires. We will probably still have some flexibility in the language to say if for some reason it does not happen, then they can continue to serve. But our goal is to have their replacement seated and appointed before their term expires.
So I would like there to be a hard cutoff, like, maybe an escape valve, like in case council has not yet, in case the applicant has indicated interest in continuation and has updated their application, but council has not yet voted for whatever reason, right? So that's we don't have this kind of perpetuating, without any recourseability, people whose term has expired. And then, on attendance, like what's kind of dismissal process, right? You say, hey, you missed 25% in the last 12 months, we're gonna give you 30 days to cure, or hey, you missed 20% in the last, last 12 months. Your next meeting would be taking you over 25%, meaning automatic dismissal. Like, what's kind of is there a cure period of it that are like, you missed 25%, you're out.
Okay, my thoughts on this, where's okay. And for procedurally, like there's 8 topics, maybe we should go through one at a time, also give our thoughts on, instead of jumping around each one. Just.
Sure.
Well, answer first, and let's do it in order after that.
Sure. Starting with attendance, I think attendance policy sounds great. I think a written attendance report sounds great. I think if you violate the attendance policy, like removal should be an implicit resignation if you don't meet the attendance policy. But also, I think there should be a concept of excused absences where the body can excuse your absence for whatever reason, like if there's some illness or sickness or some very good reason, you could go to the chair and say, hey, this is going on, and the body could excuse the absence, and that would count towards the attendance policy. But like unexcused absences without telling people why and went through, I think should be implicit, like as if they had this.
So maybe establish excused and unexcused.
Yes,
Put
like,
that.
so that would be my preference.
Yeah.
It's a common thing, excuse you, tell the chair like, hey.
Right.
Well, not those excluded.
I disagree.
Okay.
If you have someone who's elected to these advisory boards and they miss 3 meetings in a row, unless they are, to me, like in the hospital for that entire 3 months and completely out of commission, this is not okay. You made a commitment to this board when you put in your application, you're selected for this. So if you don't show up for these meetings, right, or even if you say, you know what, I'm sorry, I've got another meeting somewhere else at that time and I just can't come, and you do that repeatedly, you shouldn't be on board.
What if you get pregnant and have a baby and then need to be out for a little while?
If you know you can't commit to these boards, you should resign.
Well, I believe that's a real case for one of the boards.
If you're elected to the boards, it's because you're saying, I want to commit to this particular thing because I care about this thing. Right? You no longer show up, give your input, and do what you wanted to, but commit to that board, you should resign.
I do agree to that. I mean, I like to suggest about suggestions, but it comes back to recommending to share. It becomes projected. I mean, that person is saying, well, you yes, and then you get into a whole other issue. So I like what you say, and we call it that way.
Well, and just to comment on the attendance too, so this is great feedback. The whole idea behind providing a quarterly report to you all on the attendance is so that you're kept updated on when people are missing significant absences. So if you see, the report for the first quarter would come out in April, that'd be January, February, March. If they've missed 2 meetings in that period, then they're already going to receive a warning from us to say, hey, you're getting on the verge of missing way too many meetings. So we're going to already have that built into the process. But the goal is so that way you all are kept updated if people are missing. If they're missing 1 meeting each quarter, then again, when they get into that 4th quarter, they're going to be on the verge of missing 2 meetings.
So my earlier point about whether it's automatic or not, do you have any advice in terms of how other bodies do it? Would it require a council action to say, hey, we're moving this thing because of the attendance policy, or to be automatic, sort of you resigned, or?
So it's both. Some have it written into their policy that if a board member has missed the number of meetings, that it goes before the body as a consent item, and there's action taken to remove them. Others, the authority is given to the town clerk to remove.
Can I have a legal opinion? So in case of pregnancy, for example, like, are we getting into like, hey, we cannot do this because of, discriminatory, whatever?
With this, I don't think you're getting into issues if you're going to do either excused or not excused. I think that'll be fine. That after so many absences, if you are unable to attend, you'd be removed from the board. If it's straight across the top, I don't think there's any property right, so to speak, in the being on these advisory boards. I do have a question, a follow-up question with you. We're speaking about holdovers, I believe, at the end of a term, and that is permitted by the Constitution to allow holdovers to continue in their seat until their replacement is appointed, and that's to ensure the continued operations of the board. And so I wasn't following because train was kind of,
Okay.
got in the way.
I don't
so
want to
it
do
might
that
be-
anymore, right? Because like,
Okay.
so right now, if we as a body do not agree on the future candidate is, like, you still have candidates sitting there that's, basically outlived their term, right? And can basically be there forever because of lack of action on the, and so, I want us to kind of have a forcing function that we do vote on time for these replacements. And only with exceptional cases where, okay, like something comes up, like, let's say this was the last council meeting of the year and we had to cancel because of weather, right? And there was no vote possible, then, under very, those very specific circumstances, would we allow, something to roll over until the first meeting of the next year or something like that. But, very few exceptional cases, but other than that, I think, a hard cut off on board membership.
Well, what I would say is that the process that needs to get into place is how you appoint the successor, and not to eliminate or remove the holdover status of the member of the board or the member of the body. Because you may end up in a circumstance where you don't have a quorum now and that board can no longer function.
Right. And I think that's a good thing because it's a forcing function for us to actually do something, either review the board and say, we no longer need this, or we got to replace the board with, new members and force the application process.
But those are all things that are within this council's control.
Right. So that would be my preference, but,
So if we all appoint on time, it doesn't really matter about holdover everything. So if we all
our job on
endeavor,
time.
if we endeavor and the clerk and everybody's organized, we can do this without even worrying about this at all.
Every time that we would, on time.
It happens all the time, but I think we were late.
I mean, I don't think so.
All the time.
Oh, you're talking about now, perfect.
Oh, yeah.
On a regular basis.
Yeah.
We also have, like, with the planning board, there's a county member that appointment comes from the county. And so and I would not recommend that you do anything with respect to holdover status with the boards that are statutorily required.
The Board of Adjustment has these two members.
Right, so Board of Adjustment and Planning Board, you would not want to say, oh, well, we're just not gonna have a Board of Adjustment now because you need one.
Yeah, like I want to put some pressure on us to make sure that that happens. Right? And so instead of letting the board just sit, right? And because
It has alternates, right?
They do,
It is, it's still on.
Alternate's not ETJ member.
correct.
Okay.
So that report will give us information that you'll be aware of, like, we'll all be aware of, like, people not showing up, and then we can easily and quickly, hopefully, find new people.
I think if we're gonna have a sense policy, it should be automatic. My preference. Like if it's gonna be that reports to us, then we'll get the same subjectivity where people come to us and say, well, I do this happened. And either, I think in most cases, we would end up listening to them and effectively it wouldn't be the attendance policy. So either we have one or we don't. If we have one, it should be automatic. We do always have the option of immediately reappointing the person. If there was a good cause there, we could say, okay, reappointment. But I'll just consider that. It's action by us. It'll end up being effectively the same with the excused, unexcused thing.
Well, and we talked about that internally, with that, if we put it on consent as a report back out to you all to remove someone, then you're forced into a position to possibly not take action and then circumvent your own policy and your own recommendation. So with this, having it set up this way, they automatically get removed. And then if you want to reconsider them or want to reappoint them, then you have that option. The other thing is that we had one particular board that was taking unexcused and excused absences. And when I asked what the difference was between excused and unexcused, no one could tell me. So we stopped it, because it doesn't make sense, because in everybody's situation is gonna be different and it's gonna be justified. So it's better than not have it.
Did we make a decision here or?
So it sounds like you all are in agreement with the attendance policy that's being recommended. They'll automatically be removed. Or reappointed. So we made a decision.
Yeah.
You know, what's quarterly is.
Yeah.
What's happening.
Yeah.
For starters, I just want to give the context that we added this a couple of years ago. At the time, we did have the discussion as to who did, who didn't. And I think there was some disagreement about that, and with this compromise where we said the boards that were enshrined in the UDO got stipend, and the other kind of ad hoc boards did not, and that's what we're up to.
That was not my recollection, by the way. I thought it was for everybody the whole time, so maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. If you're planning board, board of adjustment, environmental advisory board, parcel rec, the ones that are in the UDO would have like section and stuff like New City and other ways.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm fine with the recommendation to do the part one.
I'm good with it.
Okay,
Everybody good?
Yeah. And members have the option in which a lot of cases they decline the things. But some that need it, they should have that.
I'd be interested to see who declines those, or like what the uptake is roughly, because I know initially we get a lot of pushback from existing board members and some of the community about that it should be a volunteer service.
Right.
And that this is wrong policy and the wrong stuff, and just running the sheets over time. Do you do that? Like,
Term links. So right now we've got, them set up in 3-year terms. We did hear from Chris, so the Board of Adjustment will have to be a 3-year term. They have
Why?
3-year terms. You know, you can,
Why? Requires 3-year terms.
does it speak to term lengths or maximum?
It doesn't speak to term limits, but I would keep in mind for adjustment that it's to be served as an alternate, for the first term. So at the end of, say, 6 years, if they do get reappointed, they typically only serve active. You can do a term. I think the term limit sounds to be, yeah, it could be 2.
so
Can I ask a question to staff, Diane? Does that impact operations with you guys as far as?
So 9 years is a long time. Planning board's actually 10 years right now. 6 isn't quite enough, to be honest. And particularly for board of adjustment, because their first 3 years, 2 to 3 years, they probably are not actually in many cases. So
We didn't have any cases last year. We had 2 cases for that. Like about 1 or 2 cases per year in Board of Adjustment. So their experience is quite limited, even as a second term member, their experience can be quite limited. This is just Board of Adjustment, the other boards.
yeah, planning board has lots of agenda items every meeting. And I do think 10 is too long. 6. Then I'll tell you what it is. It's actually the chair and vice chair that benefits from having a longer term, but I don't know that you can do that. The regular members learn their jobs pretty quick, but the chair and vice chair for both board of adjustment and planning board, there's some benefit to them watching for a while before they're appointed.
So aside from Board of Adjustments, Planning Board doesn't have any statutory requirements.
That's right. It's only Board of Adjustment. The General Assembly wanted to insulate Board of Adjustment politics. And I guess we did that. But so
Kind of makes sense.
What if, could we make, to the board of adjustment case, could we just make the 2 positions alternate and the board be considered separate for term length reasons? So a term as an alternate doesn't count as a term for your term length, so 2 terms on the board, 2 terms as an alternate. I mean, I'll just say, I don't know what the right answer is here. Like, I like the idea of term limits in principle because you need to like have opportunities for everyone to serve, and there's limited board spots and stuff. But I don't know what the right number is.
Well, and one thing we saw, when Ashley did her surveying of municipalities is this has come up in a lot of our neighboring jurisdictions, and a lot of them have now gone to 2-year terms. Some have changed to, or kept the 3-year terms, but 2-year terms seems to be a more common practice. And because right now we've got some boards that are 2-year terms, some boards that are 3-year terms, some that have a maximum of 10, some that have a maximum of 9. They're all over the place.
We have a
So-
1-year term.
The what?
We have a 1-year term too. Yeah.
So this is to hopefully, allow all of them to be kind of on the same, well, not same term, but at least on a 2-year rotation and be consistent across all of
And
them.
to be clear, if we modify this, this wouldn't impact current members.
Correct.
It would be.
And that's later in the slide.
So can we solve for board of adjustments differently from all the other boards? So for board of adjustments, if you say limit to 1 term as a standby and 2 terms as an active board member, so total of 9 years, it's basically 6 years of, being a voting member.
And it might be easier to just keep board of adjustment the way it is.
Yeah, I think it,
3-year terms with a maximum of 9 years.
Okay, that's the same, effectively the same. Okay.
Because it may be, if they're an alternate 3, if they move down to alternate 2 and then 1, that may take some time. So they may never serve as a regular member if otherwise.
given the discussion, that's kind of my preference, I guess. If the intention of the statute is that is board of adjustments not political, what if we just don't touch what it
Leave
does today?
board of adjustments alone.
Leave it, whatever it is, leave it alone completely, and then whatever this policy applies to the board.
But I prefer 2-year terms, just to increase the rotation, give more people an opportunity to serve. I think there's a lot of interest in the boards, just judged by the applications, the number of applications that we receive when we do really open up board positions. So I prefer a shorter term, increase the rotation a little bit.
Everybody know that?
I don't care, so, yeah, whatever.
Sure. Okay. Eligibility. So, this adds the youth representative, clarification on what that looks like. And then also, I think all of our neighboring jurisdictions, with the exception of Holly Springs, has, this tax component as a verification process.
With the youth one, Alan, obviously they're gonna age out of youth, presumably if they're here 6 years. So is there a plan for that? Are they good for 6 years as long as they're 18 before under 18 when they start? Is that the idea?
So they can serve in the youth, so youth representative would serve anywhere in high school. So they could start, I guess, high school is what, 13 or 14?
Okay.
And so they could essentially serve.
Basically, maximum.
Do they have to get out when after their 18th birthday though? Or they can do it if they're in college, right?
Say that, but
Okay,
I wouldn't say that it would end somebody's term.
okay.
Help when they're birth, yeah.
I mean, or,
I would just say you have to be enrolled in high school.
right, or did they roll off like the first, when the term ends after their 18th birthday?
Well, that person, if it has been high school, they're gonna be in a cycle of new ones all the time. Is that what we want, I guess? I mean, if they had to be in high school, they're probably not gonna start till like their senior or junior, and they're only gonna have one term in this. I mean, I'm fine with it being okay. I just, that'd be the consequence of that kind of,
I think the bigger
tightness.
consequences, like people turn 18 and then go off to college, right? So yeah, I think you're gonna see more resignation.
they likely will resign in that, unless they're going to college around here.
I think it's a natural place for like former mayors in terms of.
Yep.
We're an opportunity. I think it's great. I think it's a good resume builder. I don't think we're gonna get many lifers here with lots of 6 years. I think it's gonna be, this is what I do in senior or junior year and then rotate off.
So what about the composition or the total number of board members? Are we adding a position to the board for the youth?
We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
And they're all different, by the way. I noticed. I was kind of surprised by the number of members being really different on all these boards. Is that what we want? It seemed like, it didn't seem to make sense to me. I thought we were gonna align it, but
Yeah.
That's good, right?
So resignations, this is just clarifying that those get submitted. Meeting minutes, this did come up at a recent advisory board meeting. So we did centralize them into the clerk's office, as Ashley mentioned back in August. And so they have a consistent format, they have a consistent theme, a consistent structure, with council meeting minutes. It has come up though, if an advisory board meeting minutes need to be as thorough as council meeting minutes, and if it makes more sense to have more of a summarization of the actions taken versus kind of the verbatim back and forth like we do for council meetings.
I agree. Yeah, I think, all right, it's good. I would just note, I would request that the minutes be sent out once they get approved by the board or something to us, maybe put on our consent agenda to accept them, just so the public can look at them, see what actions are working.
So.
We accept them? Because the board's the ones that accept the minutes, right?
So they're put on our agenda just for
Information.
see them. Like, so our action is to accept them, but it's just there so people can see.
Good, all the minutes for all the boards each time? I was thinking that the summary at the end of the year would be more appropriate for the public to see.
I think, why would you, no harm's being done, it's just gets to be like another one.
Extra clutter that public had to sit through, I guess.
We wouldn't talk about it. Again, consent agenda.
I know, it's just more things to scroll through. All right.
There is a different standard for Board of Adjustment minutes that with a quasi judicial hearing, they will need to be much more detailed. So just keeping that in mind with the summary minutes.
And for what it's worth, I don't think anybody in the clerk's office wants to do very detailed and thorough minutes. But it does help when it comes to research. And we talked about this at the recent HAB meeting, is when you are looking for a specific topic, it is a whole lot easier to do a text search than it is to try to find where something is in a recap or a live stream. So that's where summary minutes are much more subjective, because it depends on what you feel like is a highlight that needs to be mentioned. That's just something to.
So there's potentially a lot of ways to solve this, right? So you have your flip notes, and then maybe a set of keywords that you keep, like for your own records. So like, hey, there was this meeting where they talk about, defense on Hunter Street, or whatever, right? And so even though that may not be specifically called out in the summary, you have a set of keywords that are still searchable for your research purposes.
Didn't we on the agenda process, we talk about adding an informational section?
Yes.
So the minutes, it should be on the informational section instead of send it to a vote.
Yeah.
I like that for a non-vote.
I think, yep, and then the next slide.
It's fine.
And then the next slide is the annual report. This is, like I said, as Ashley mentioned, this is a common practice in some of our larger municipalities. They have the board come back to you all, the board chair, and present on these kind of core things, how they've been different. What are the key initiatives that they've been working on? So when you talk about, we want to see more policy recommendations, we want to see more boots on the ground development and research and that kind of thing, that's where this would come up at.
Would it be like a lightning round in one of our meetings where they get like maybe 3 or 4 minutes to go through everything, and each one comes in after the other?
Sure.
It'd be kind of fun.
I would prefer to stagger it a little bit. So instead of all the boards delivering December 31st, that you have kind of staggered by quarter, and then bring them kind of in front of council a presentation to, I like the lightning round.
I'm trying to knock them out here in one meeting. It'd be kind of fun. Okay, but fine. Yeah, we can stagger them. I don't care.
And then just for clarity, as we talk through some of these boards, some were set up with folks that were not corporate limit appointees. So the recommendation here is that they be a corporate limits unless otherwise specified by statute. So like an ECJ, a county representative, et cetera. We've got some on one particular board that I think over half don't live in UK. So that's just for what it's worth.
The only thing I would say is that you all recently added Wake County resident to planning board. That's not a statutory requirement, just a plan.
Can we make an exception? So if we strongly believe that we need a ETJ representative on one of the boards, but it's not statutorily required, can we make an exception?
Not that we pass an ordinance saying we can't.
Right.
An ordinance saying you-
So like, I think like requiring it might not be appropriate for all, but then having no ETJ members on any board, but the planning board is not.
So which one do you want them on? Which one do you want the ETJ on?
I'm not sure.
So basically it says unless otherwise specified.
Yes.
These standards specified or required or something.
As part of the charter of the board itself. That makes sense. You're right.
Next is the scope and responsibilities of our advisory boards. Why are we doing this? So Bee City was established in 2020 under the Parks and Rec advisory format. There are currently no active members, but there are 6 members appointed to that board for 1-year term only. So what they normally achieve in this committee is the pollinator program, the pollinator garden, and actively engaging in the Youth Apex Council. So what we recommend is dissolving this advisory board and consume it under the Environmental Advisory Board, EAB.
Ashley, I thought the Bee City, to be a part of that, you had to have a committee called the Bee City Committee. Is that not correct?
Which is, that's what EAB would be designated as. They don't have to be called Bee City.
It's just a committee looking at these issues. Okay.
As long as it's-
I thought it requires its own committee when we did it the first time. That's why I thought we did this like this.
And you could form a subcommittee underneath the environment.
That's what they're suggesting. I just thought I thought that wasn't allowed to be part of that organization, but you're saying it is allowed as a subcommittee. Okay.
Board of Adjustment. Again, there's the purpose. They also are a statutory board, also with quasi judicial format meetings. The Board of Adjustment does consist of 5 regular members, 3 alternates, so who are residents. So when they are appointed to the Board of Adjustment, they're automatically a alternate 3. It goes down to 2, 1, and then you are a active voting member. They do meet monthly. So we are recommending 2 3-year terms. 2 3-year terms for
It's a typo, but we understand.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm done.
We're gonna change, we're not gonna touch terms for.
We're not. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So now we're gonna jump into EAB. Again, as we mentioned before, EAB was formed in 2019. They were established as a 9-member board. Some of the key focus areas that they've worked on and have gotten accomplished is the environmental zoning conditions, which is included in the zoning rezoning packet, and then the lighting ordinance recommendations that they've been working on as well. So when we look at EAB, because we are recommending that the tree cap as well as the Bee City be absorbed under EAB. We are recommending that we increase their membership by 2 members. So we add a voting member from either the Bee City or tree cap folks, and then 1 of our youth representatives. There's also been some discussion on whether to if it's helpful to still include EAB in the rezoning process, whether you still want rezoning petitions to go through EAB, or whether it's whether there's advantages or disadvantages to do that, because they've already established kind of the environmental zoning conditions. The applicant provides that, it goes before EAB, they kind of hash out things again. Some things change, some things don't, and they end up coming to you all for a recommendation. So if there's benefit for it going there, great. But because there's the environmental zoning conditions, is that really needed? And it also frees them up to work on other environmental programming and initiatives. And then again, changing their 2-year term. So we'll pause here to see if there's any thoughts on EAB.
So in B, you say to revise, you mean you recommend to change it, or you want us to discuss it? Okay.
If there's advantages for it to continue to go through EAB.
To remove that review phase and, like Alan was talking about, making sure that that brings them up to work on special projects. So that would be my preference.
I disagree. I think the review process has value, and the purpose of the review process was a lot of the conversations we would have at the rezoning. We wanted to push that earlier, and the EAB to have those discussions, like save some trees or replant this or do that. Like the purpose of the review is for them to make those, ask those questions and have those reviews very early in the process. The developer has an opportunity to consider that, as opposed to us dropping on the last second. I fear if we remove that review, kind of go back to the way it used to work, where we'll the shoe will drop during the review meeting, and the developer will feel like they're being ambushed, and it'll be confusing, and it wasn't great for everybody. So I like the review because it asks those questions earlier.
So my observation of that is that the EAB often gets these projects, they get them really early, but the problem is they're often not very well formed yet when the EAB reviews them. So they know like where it is. They have an aerial view of what it's going to look like, but not the plans that we often see toward the end of the process. And the recommendations are often difficult for the developer to commit to because they don't know enough information themselves yet about it. So I think at the very least, changing how and when this happens might be helpful, because I've heard all the time over and over again, they're like, we don't know where the wetlands exactly are. We don't know the type of trees there are yet because we haven't done the survey. It's very common with that committee. So
Can we, so if we remove the EAB review specifically, because so, the standards have been set, right? Like with our environmental standards, they're part of our rezoning package. And so the planning team is asking for these things as part of the, the whole application process. And so we can record what the developer is offering in terms of environmental conditions and what they're not offering. Can we look through the environmental lens during the planning board review meeting and kind of get these angles instead of having yet another specific review done by the EAB? Because the standard has been set. And I think and I wasn't there at the time, obviously, but when this started, I don't think those standards were there. Those standards were set. And now that they are, and there's a guideline for the planning staff and the planning boards to, consider as part of their evaluation, can we shift that responsibility? And to Andre's point, free up the EAB to look at more project-based, like, hey, what do we want to do with solar, or what are your recommendations around, wetland preservation, or God knows what, like something that is more advisory in nature than a third presentation for them to go through with the same materials.
So those conditions are often a very long list of different things, and it's a kind of checklist thing that happens. So oftentimes they'll check several things off for like planting trees of a certain native species or preserving whatever, and they often don't want to do the things that solar things that often one of the committee always asks for. So it's a big checklist. It's not like there's 10 things on there that they can go through and say, I'll do like one of these 10. It's like 25 things, and there's subcategories and things that they fill in in that process. And so it's hard to have something like you're talking about where it needs to be shortened a little bit if it's going to be given to every developer and it's going to be a shorter list and they say yes or no to that stuff than what they do right now, where it's more open-ended.
But we have a standard table that we get in our staff packets, like of those 25 things, and okay, here's what the developer has agreed to. So that same table is already there, it's already given, and I don't think it gets filled out like during the EAB meeting.
The EAB makes a recommendation and fills in some of the numbers when they make the recommendation.
So I would say to your point, I would just keep in mind that there's site-specific stuff, and this is the negotiation. Like some of those 25 items may be more important than some of the others. And that's what that conversation is for, is you need some subjectivity to say, well, this is really important here for this reason, this isn't supported, you know, and so on. So I think that touch point is valuable for that reason.
Do you think, and I'm, maybe I'm like asking for your opinion, do you think that the EAB's influence on whether or not they choose those things would be more or less than the planning board's?
I think we set up the EAB. One thing that bothers me about this process is EAB doesn't make a formal recommendation to us up or down. And that was something that I hope they did initially, which was set up that way. I think if they had a formal up or down vote, that would be more meaningful because that would give them something. The planning board has that. Planning board's making a recommendation. The developer proposing wants to get the upvote. The EAB formally voted, I think would be more.
Appreciate that.
I was gonna say, for what it's worth, I know that Shelley Mayo in the planning department has kind of served as the staff liaison to EAB in planning, and so Diane may have some thoughts or things to mention.
So I think that it's potentially could be set up more like the Housing Advisory Board, which the Housing Advisory Board has a policy. They've got their checklist of things that they'd like to see. There is a staff member, Rebecca from CDNC, who reviews every single project and makes a recommendation. We have an environmental programs coordinator that we're in the process of hiring. Will be here February 3rd. And so I think the thought is that it would move away from reviewing every single rezoning application. In the beginning, they did have to do it because they hadn't come up with their set of criteria. We now have the set of criteria. I think it's still appropriate for the EAB to review that once a year, twice a year, refine, change, their recommendations. I do think they should be working on UDO amendments. Of course, we have a new state law that's going to make that more difficult. But that was our thought when we were thinking about hiring this new position and trying to have a staff person dedicated to the EAB versus it's a tag team right now between Water Resources. When we talked with the chair and vice chair, we did talk about maybe there's a threshold, maybe the really big rezonings still go to them to be looked at, but the smaller ones don't go. It seems like they're spending too much of their time on rezoning, so maybe.
Yes. I think that's right.
So what would that, from your perspective, right, where would you draw that line? Like, is it,
I think
development
plan unit
over 50
developments
units?
could go. I think it might be this for rezoning, but that might encourage people to rezone to, high density multifamily and not do a plan unit development if that they don't have to have that extra staff. But typically a plan unit development has mixed use. It's a large project. It's things that you've seen recently, Seymour PUD, those types of things that are a little more complicated and a little larger, and there's a little more leeway on, well, what all could they do? When you have a small project, they can do a few things, but they're not looking at that whole laundry list of conditions.
And that was the reason why I said what I said, is that checklist, that you alluded to is something that wasn't in place, right? We now have that. And that's because the EAB did a really good job about summarizing what things are usually asked for. So now we have that. We also have a staff member going on board that could potentially review those documents for us. So my thought is let them be an advisory board, let them do what their passion is, which is usually projects, which usually about increasing the amount of support our environment, bring specific.
I don't want to get into discussion, but just for the sake of time, who's in support of Councilwoman Killen's words?
So to clarify, you're saying maybe the larger certain acreage or a PUD it goes to them to review that plan. Everything else would go to the staff person to advise, and then the EAB would revise things accordingly every so often for the the process, but not look at those individually.
Can we have the EAB make a recommendation of whether they want to draw the line?
They're working for us, right? They're advising us. So I think we're the
Right,
ones that can decide.
Well, we get to. Right, but I think the EAB I mean, we're speaking on behalf of 9 people that we believe spent too much time reviewing rezoning requests, and okay, what's the proper balance?
Trying to get to a decision today, and I mean, and to Councilman Gantz, they report that, so I want to get to the decision.
And maybe we can change when it comes in the process, because having that PUD map would really help the EAB evaluate those projects. And if they don't have that map yet, it's harder to figure out what's worth asking for.
I'm okay with a threshold. I don't know. To Diane's point, if we say PUDs, I mean, it's very PUDs. You know, maybe it's going to be a side threshold instead for certain acres.
There is one now, but I think it's too small. Is it less than an acre they don't do it, or less than 5 acres?
Well,
Oh, is it listed here?
why don't we just leave that at that then? Like, think about how we
Okay.
still, I do think the review is positive in the sense that that's the way that the EAB members have a direct impact on it. The way that talking about EAB amendments may not. You know, if you're on the EAB, you want to do stuff to save preserve trees or protect streams or whatever, and there's no better way to do that than directly in the design process to have those discussions.
Okay.
You have to be doing it, and it'll take years, and then another couple of years, right?
So maybe 5 for C? 5 acres? That would knock out several.
Yeah, I think, I don't think we have to decide today, that we need to talk about that could be our direction is like, hey, like this is an issue, let's go back and change the numbers to try to further things. So you're only hitting important stuff. So it wants to do the house nature.
How do you adjust?
Talking with Amanda, because she deals with all those projects more than I can't pass on the acreage. She's right now. She's a minute or so behind on it.
Well, I mean, but to your point earlier now, like we're not deciding differently today. Like, correct. We can come back with a different recommendation whenever it's finalized. Correct. March, whatever.
Okay.
All right, roll.
So can we table this? Because I also believe if we change the scope, then do we need to look at the number of board members? Because 11 board members feels like a lot to me.
It does to me as well.
All right,
Good with the terms.
terms of good.
Terms are good.
The terms will apply. That's previous, so.
Okay.
We'll see that come up in each slide, but it seems like that there's consistency to just do the 2-year terms for a maximum of 3. So moving into housing, and Diane, I guess whenever we get back, we want to circle back or on the
On the
acreage.
acreage? Oh, well, she wrote back, she's at least 10 acres. What she wrote back.
10, let's do it.
Right,
Okay, all right, perfect. All right, housing. So when housing was initially established in 2021, they had a core set of tasks, again, that they were looking to accomplish. This was before our amazing CDNC staff was seated and here and on board. We had one housing programs manager, CJ, that was in our long range planning division in planning. When this board was originally established, and they were established to assist with some funding recommendations related to housing, assist with housing advocacy efforts, as well as assist with the creation of the annual housing report. Since most of those things have been kind of checked off, and we have a housing staff, a core housing team, we're now at a place where we really need some guidance and some direction on whether it's beneficial to continue to have a housing advisory board. And if so, what does that scope of responsibility look like? Or has the time come where now, okay, it served its purpose, we have housing staff, it's no longer needed. So we can talk about that.
Let's start with Councilwoman Pillsbury, because she's been a part of since the inception, so we see on that.
Sure. So, being a part of the HAB, we have accomplished a lot. So, my thought is that at this point in time, we either turn these responsibilities over to staff and do like an ad hoc committee of some sort, where we get that out annual housing report from staff. If there's any decisions that need to be made to take to the rest of the council, that would be done through that ad hoc committee. At this point, basically done with the things that we checked off. So, you know, I don't feel the need for this to continue.
So when this board got started, I don't think that community development neighborhood connections was a thing yet. So we've hired staff that has absorbed a lot of the work that this board was set out to achieve, which is fantastic. But there's much more to community development and neighborhood connections than just the housing program. And so would it be conceivably a better idea to have a committee, like an advisory committee specific to the whole department? So kind of looking at everything, you know, from community development and neighborhood connections that includes affordable housing as part of its scope. So we're not doing away with the entire thing, you know, from an advisory board committee, but we're kind of absorbing that into a committee that has a larger scope that reflects the breadth of the departments.
Going back to what I might not be understanding, but I don't understand what you mean. Like going from there to what's the difference?
Community development and neighborhood connections does more than just a housing program, right? There is no advisory board that covers all of that.
Well, there'll be a council committee.
That's what I'm suggesting to the council. Similar to our personnel committee or finance committee or something like that, but it ad hoc. So basically it only meets as needed. It doesn't meet regularly.
Thank you. Where staff made your discussion, where y'all at on that?
Yeah, I think with the revamping and the discussion around council committees, we've worked to align all of the town departments and functions with those new committees. We're going to talk about January, February. So I think that lines up with the concept that you're talking about. CDNC would fall under, I forget the new titles of the committees, but it would fall under one of those council committees.
Okay.
So that would be,
Okay.
we would be captured there. Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody good with that?
Yep.
All right.
So that would mean that this committee would be dissolved because there's already the work's being done by staff.
Yes.
Actually,
Greg left.
Sure, it was too bright for the room.
Dissolve wise out of the room.
All right.
Yeah.
Parks and Rec. Okay, so, there are 9 members, who are appointed for 3-year term.
Back, there it is. Yeah.
They do meet monthly, so they are a very active board. And so they were established in 1987. So to keep that going and to continue to be consistent, kudos to them. So, Public Art is a subcommittee under Parks and Rec. So we are proposing, recommending that they be their own standalone committee. What we are recommending, establishing term limits. They currently do not have term limits on this board. This is the only advisory board that we do not have term limits on. So recommendation is to establish term limits for this board, which would be consistent with all the other boards. So 2-year terms for a maximum of, established term, maximum of 3 2-year terms. And the cultural shift to Public Art to its own standalone.
Everybody good
everybody
with
with that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
that? Everybody's good.
Nothing.
Move on.
All right, the planning board, I think will be relatively easy. This is a statutorily required board, as much as you know. They have 9 voting members, 1 non-voting member. The non-voting member has historically been Jeff Hastings until recently when he moved into the Wake County seat. And then they meet monthly. So the recommendation here is to, again, amend the terms to be consistent with the others, where there's 2-year terms for a maximum of 3, add a youth representative, and then also change the historical society position to be a voting position. So that would increase planning board by 2 seats.
Regarding like numbers 4 and 5 on the purpose,
Okay.
I wonder, is similar to EAB, is they're spending all their time on rezonings, they're never getting to that stuff. And are we allowed to have a similar like size of development that doesn't have to go through this committee?
No.
It has to, everything has to? Okay. I
For the rezonings. Yeah.
for the rezonings, I just feel like I've never seen a study, maybe I am just mistaken, about like some ordinance they want to do or something they want to do. It's similar to the thing from EAB with the lighting. I've never seen that from the planning board. I'd love to see that more. Is that it? Am I wrong in never seeing that very often?
I totally agree. I would love to get more policy advice on future land use and things like that.
Yes.
From the planning boards, and arguably they're spending most of their time on rezoning.
Stuff like the land use amendments or the comprehensive plan,
Yeah.
you go to them as well. You do amendments also by statute. You go through. I mean, I totally agree that like they could be initiating more stuff and proposing more rules. I think part of it has to do with the workload of the planning board. It's actually pretty large because there's so many rezonings that, like us, like a lot of their meetings are just public hearings and then, you know, they don't have, like, we also meet separately for our meetings. We have our committee meetings, those sorts of, you know, vehicles for us to do stuff. And they don't really have that because they just have a monthly meeting, you know, so it's a question of workload. And, you know, but I do fundamentally agree that, planning board, you know, we could be doing work to propose you doing this. Development rules, assuming we're still allowed to make development rules.
And in the past, they have worked on UDO amendments. Basically, they tell us what they want, staff does all the work.
Yeah.
But their main thing that they've done is participation in the long-range planning process. Now, I will say that over the years, there have been folks who are more involved and folks that have been less involved. I think it might be a good thing for you all to tell them they're required to participate in the comprehensive plan process because they should. Not just get, you know, updates at their meeting. They should go and talk to the people that are at these meetings, the citizens that come out. So that would be my suggestion. I don't know if there's I'm not sure what they would be working on exactly. State law has tightened its grip on what we can and can't do over the years. We used to be able to have a lot more freedom.
Yeah.
So sound like some things to be discussed later with that, maybe, just going in.
For the voting member and then the historical rep. And then these are taken straight from the UDO.
Right.
So if there's additional things that you want to see from the planning board, then that'll come up. That's different. Okay. Public Art Committee, again, as Ashley mentioned, that's been operating as kind of a subcommittee within Parks and Rec. When it was originally established in 2017, it was set up so that there was a focus put on public art structures, and then just having public art more visible and present in town. And so they've achieved that with the public art structures all across town. But they've also done a lot more than that. They've done our murals in certain places, mural walls, and then we've also seen our transportation bus stops also have some public art there at those. And so the idea, and this has been a push from the Public Art Committee, is to be a standalone. They want to kind of be out separate from Parks and Rec because it is a separate function, so to speak. So this is just providing a recommendation that we have an Arts and Culture Advisory Board, broaden their scope, and then add a youth voting representative.
So the broadening, the broadening, like, so what does that mean to you or to you guys in this context? Besides just adding culture to the name?
Well, so it would broaden their scope. So right now they're they're not just focused on public art. And because public art is their title, they're doing a lot more art-related initiatives. And so this hopefully encompasses those program efforts.
Okay.
You're not making a recommendation on the terms here, but these are 3-year terms. I presume that we'll follow the 2-year terms, 2 consecutive term guideline here.
I think it's great. I think our public art committee has done a fantastic job of organizing the event tonight. I think it's a great example of how the advisory boards can make an impact on our community. I'm doing a great job.
How many more slides we got? 2?
I mean,
We got.
Yeah. This was too much.
Transit advisory, again, we don't have a place for multimodal transportation. So one of the things that has come up in some of our long-range planning surveys and speaking with Shannon is a desire from community members to have a place for bike and pedestrian efforts. That's not real clear where that comes up. So instead of creating a separate bike and ped advisory commission, which some municipalities have done, it's being recommended that we incorporate that into the transit committee and then change that to multimodal transportation advisory board. And then, of course, broadening the scope would include the bike and ped efforts. And then the youth vote.
And the terms here, are we doing the 6-year thing, or the 6 2-year terms? Okay.
This encompasses then everything. So public transit, road construction, pedestrian bike, all of that is in one place.
Correct.
I like it. Okay.
Yeah. And this, the one thing I'll call out here is that this is the board that has the least number of seats. So I think when it was initially set up, so they started meeting in 2017 and then they were formalized in 2019. There's 3 ex officio staff members, and those staff members can continue to be present at the meeting, but the committee itself would benefit from having additional support in membership.
Okay. TreeCap, all right. Currently, there's only 2 active members. 5 appointed, currently 5 members are appointed for a 1-year term. Established in 2016, again. Also, their achievements, as you know, Plant the Peak, Heritage Tree Proposal, Tree Archives, etc. So the recommendation, again, is for this to dissolve because they do not meet regularly. And we do not have a lot of members on this board, only 2 active members. So again, consume it under the EAB as it aligns with environmental advisory.
Good.
Yeah, I would just say for the EAB and for the B City, for tree cap and B City, like, I think it might be helpful if the EAB formally formed a subcommittee for that purpose, as opposed to just sort of saying it's not your responsibility, we're much just dissolved entirely. Be my ask.
So if you form an ad hoc committee of the membership, then it would become a subcommittee of the 9-member board, right?
Yes.
And so it wouldn't be a whole nother set of people.
Right. It would not.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be some members of the board is like, you guys working on that. Tree cap.
Okay, so these are our summary of recommendations. I won't go over them as time, we're running out of time, but I think we've made a lot of headway on the recommendations that you've already have informed us on. And if there's anything that we had not discussed on here, feel free to bring that forward.
So from an overall process, like February, you're gonna bring all of this back in terms of.
Yep.
Oh, we'll look at that.
So in many cases, a lot of these boards are referencing the UDO. There are some that's just referencing the code. So because there are UDO changes, they'll go through the normal UDO amendment process. So you'll be seeing those. We did commit that we would be meeting with the staff liaisons and the department directors that are affected by these recommended changes in January, pending the feedback that we got from you all. The advisory board administrative policies, so like attendance, stipends, those kinds of things, come back through just a normal policy that won't be incorporated into each of the charters, et cetera. Recruiting for the vacant positions, as you just given us guidance, we'll be adding some representatives and then also adding some youth representatives. So we'll start that recruitment process. The first round of attendance reports will go out in April. And then the annual report, this allows the advisory boards to kind of shift into this new format and kind of be working on things through this year. And that'll come up soon. We'll take the feedback on the staggered reporting.
Thank y'all so much, Alan, Ashley. Great job.
Mayor, we got 152 slides. But we reduced them down to 14. I want to talk about
Good job.
maybe 3 of them we'll talk about. So we'll go through this pretty quickly. Please do stop along the way if you have any questions. But you all got this in your packet prior, so hopefully you've seen and you recall a lot of this information anyway. Real quick, purpose, so folks can walk around and drink some alcohol. History of this 2021.
It's a little more to this.
I'm going best. And then the scope, of course, is that it will include properties in the downtown area, in the permitted area. It could be multi-tenant establishments and also public spaces like streets and drop off and stuff. So that's just, again, purpose, history, and scope. And some key timelines and developments. Again, we've been talking about this in 2021. There was a law that was passed allowing municipalities to get the social districts going. And then that's when the council started talking about this. During the first half of 2022, a lot of stuff happened. We had some research that we did. We had a special project team formed, special project team met with ABC staff. House Bill 2011 passed, which had some revisions to the rules. And then the team actually presented some findings and recommendations from their research and surveys, et cetera, to county administration. Some more timeline and key developments from May or July 2023. The planning committee did revisit this. I think that was the conversation, the meeting that I was at when that conversation resurrected itself. The downtown businesses were canvassed again to get feedback from them. You can see there the results of that. That survey was actually presented to the downtown stakeholders at what when we used to have quarterly downtown stakeholder meetings. And then again, those survey results were also submitted to county administration for information. So,
Joanna, I have a question. I remember that discussion was a lot about the feedback was about whether there've been a lot of negatives from the communities that have already established these things. And what we didn't talk about were the positives, whether it's been popular and whatever else. And my impression, at least from North Carolina, most places, is that there's not been a ton of negatives or positives in this. It's not been as big of a deal as people thought it was going to be.
I don't have a slide on it here, but we did actually do some recent research. I think Colleen looked at about 4 or 5 communities in the local area, and all the feedback is positive.
But have sales and people walking around, has that really gone up in these places, in these towns that had it versus not?
There's in some areas, for example, in Cary, theirs is just limited to Cary Park, but there are businesses outside of that that want to be part of that.
Okay.
So there really hasn't been a overwhelming, negative impact or negative comments from the other communities that we surveyed. And we can actually, if you'd like to see exactly what that information was, we can make that available to you.
Okay.
Again, so some of the objectives, of course, it can enhance social and community engagement in the downtown area. It can provide economic benefits for the businesses, increase foot traffic, which is always what they want. Improves the welcoming atmosphere of the downtown area. And of course, that also can supplement existing promotional events and festivals and things like that we already have in town. Here's a map of the proposed district. Basically, it's Salem Street from Salem Heritage Plaza, which is where the sushi place in Peak Divine is, all the way down to William Street, where Tap Station is. And then it also includes parts of Chatham, Elm, and Saunders. So again, this is just the proposed district that can be discussed, but that's a good starting point. Hours of operation, basically Monday through Sunday, 11 to 10.
was, one of the feedback that we got from other communities was having a consistent time every single day, the same day, was really helpful. So instead of having like, oh, make it, different on Saturdays or Sundays, or make it different on Mondays and Tuesdays. So consistently, the proposal will be to have it the same every day. This next part gets into ABC permitted and non-permitted businesses. Of course, ABC permitted are your restaurants, et cetera, and then your non-permitted like your retail and boutiques and other stuff that's in the district area. Businesses can opt in or opt out. No action is required if they want to opt out. And then you can see there's some criteria for those that want to opt in. There's some selling and serving recommendation, as well as some designated container criteria that must be adhered to per North Carolina statutes. And then for the non-permitted businesses to opt in, again, some requirements and recommendations on the consumption. Again, the requirements as far as the designated containers. There's a lot of signage that's required. And then, of course, law enforcement. We do want to put some responsibilities on those that decide to partake in this endeavor. So again, just some rules for the patrons, and this just all kind of just common sense, if you will. But beverages have to be consumed within the district. They have to be in special containers only during the specific hours that are posted. You have to be 21, and there's a limit on how many beverages you can get up to of a certain kind at one time. And then, of course, disposing your containers within the social district before leaving the social district. So this is the quick discussion point that you would need to have. And this is an example from Cary. So again, who will provide or purchase the social district cups that are required? There's some criteria as far as what you have on the cups that's required. These are actually an example of the one in Cary. And what the town of Cary does is the town purchases the cups, and then the businesses reimburse them for the cost of just a regular plastic cup, if you will. So the town subsidizes the remainder. And so in Cary, for example, the special social district cup, a 9-ounce costs 33 cents a cup. A regular cup costs 8. So the businesses pay 8 cents a cup, and the town of Cary subsidizes it to 25 cents per cup. But that's a discussion. You all can decide how you want to do that. But again, that's one of the key points you'd have to figure out is who purchases, who pays for the cups, and if or how the town would like to participate in the cost of that cup. But you are required to have a special participant. Not in this presentation, but we can get them for you. Sure, yeah, this was just one quick example that we found. And then there's some responsibilities for the town, of course, PD for enforcement, and then the town could vote, if you will, a permitted business if they violate the rules. There's recommendations and requirements for signage, so creating the district logo, where we're going to put them, ordering them, distributing them. And then there's signage required for the businesses as far as a sign that says sold here, or yes, if they're involved in the social district, or no, if they're not. They're not required to have a no sign, but it is recommended. So again, there's all kinds of recommendations and requirements regarding the signage.
In your research, the Garner example there, I've always been nervous about the businesses that are not taking part in it, having this kind of awkward conversation with their customers every time, over and over again, like you can't have this in here. But I'm guessing that those kind of signs would really help avoid a lot of that, right? Hopefully.
That's why it's recommended. It's not required by law. They're not required to no sign of some kind, but it is recommended that might alleviate some of the constant questioning.
Okay.
And then this just regards special events within the social district. You can issue a permit for a one-time event within or partially within the social district. And then if an event occurs during the operating hours, again, there's some recommendations there about notifying the ABC Commission and complying with the district regulations.
Can they opt out, like for Peak Fest, if they wanted to? Because that would be be open during that time, and they've been alcohol free, I think, forever, right?
I'm looking at Chris to see if he has an answer for us. Good question.
Okay.
can suspend whole district for individual business. And I'm not sure if we see that.
Okay.
That's where
It would change the vibe of Peak Festival a bit if we,
it would be a total suspension.
people carrying around.
So what's
For
the
Peak Fest.
desire of staff on this is make a decision we want forward with the social district and you.
So a lot of the details we can still work through. Joanna presented a lot of the stickers and cups, and so there are some decision points. We can bring back the specific action items on those. So we just need a general consensus if this is something we want to move forward with, and start putting those pieces together. If you're willing to give us any guidance on some of the specifics, we'll take it. If you're not ready for that, at least it would be helpful to know, yes, do this, start now, go look at, bring something back to us that is this, or don't do it at all.
I give you some guidance. We've been spending 4 years on this topic, staff time. I think it's positive. We've got a lot of positive reviews on it. We're elected to make decisions. We need to move forward and do it.
I disagree. Downtown businesses were 50-50 last year when we surveyed them. Instead of cramming it down everybody's throat, I think we need to take a look at businesses again, especially since we now have a larger district. I think that we're talking about was surveyed last year. I'm not opposed to the idea, but I don't, I would prefer, first of all, like in my mind, this was always tied to downtown streetscape plan where people actually have a destination for their cup to go to. Because right now, you buy your drink and then it's like, like where are you gonna go?
To the shops, I guess, would be the main thing now.
Okay, and so if half the shop don't choose to participate, like which is kind of what the survey from last year seemed to indicate, that kind of limits the destination, right? So I would like to get feedback again from some of the downtown businesses or the downtown businesses that might be involved here. I like the idea, just like we did with the Parklands, like maybe giving this a try, like, let's get designated, weekends or whatnot, where we actually try it out and then get the public and the business comfortable, because there seems to be more of a public interest than a business interest at this point. And then take it from there. Like,
What percentage, sorry to interrupt, what percentage of you think you want to see businesses? Like, is it 60, 70? You're never going to get 100. So what are you looking for?
More than 50%. Like 50% is the bare minimum, right? And then, and so to do this at 11 o'clock in the morning, is that this is the timing right? Like I think there's things here that's are still worth picking out a little bit. I agree with you. Like I don't want to continue to burn staff time for in perpetuity. I do want to make some forward momentum here, but I don't think we have materially changed anything downtown. That also this is better now than it was last year.
Yeah, I just want to let me add one more thing. Cary, Holly Springs, Fuquay, Varner, Wendell, Clayton, and Joco. They do it. Apex don't do it. That's kind of weird. But I'll say this.
It's also an opt-in. They don't want to participate in it. I mean, that percentage, my thought is we're gonna see about 6 months worth of them looking to see what's happening, deciding, oh, it's not as bad as I thought.
I'll just say this on this point. You're all right. Brett and I, we've taken 2 cracks at this in the previous couple of years. There's history here. And we've gotten a tremendous amount of pushback from a lot of the business owners and some residents. And I'll say in the time since then, like I said, my email to you, Mayor, like stuff has changed. There's different people down there now. A lot of businesses that we talked to before, they're not there anymore. Or we have new owners coming in and they may have different ideas. Also, what changed is we do have towns with experience, whereas before, a lot of hypotheticals going on. This might be bad, this might happen. I think we're scared by that. We can say now, well, look at what happened. But I would like to do that survey again because I'm uncomfortable with based on my previous conversation with them, for us to go and prove it without going back and say, hey, things are different now, and kind of getting buy-in. Just do that survey again, just rerun what we've done before. I think it'll be positive. I think we'll have a better result this time, and we can move forward. But I'd like to do that. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a more positive experience, but I mean, I have community input, just the optics of us going forward without revisiting that makes me comfortable based on the previous conversations I've had. And to the opt-in point, that's a good one, because the fear at the time, really what shut it down, the previous two attempts, is we had people saying, we're not gonna join. But you do this, you do what you want, but we're not gonna do it, I'm gonna sign and stop everyone. If we create a social district where no one opts in, I know that's not the case, but like, that was the fear at the time. No one opts in, it'll just cause confusion. If we tell people you can do this, but no one's opted in, so you really can't do it until people opt in. You don't know what shops you can go in or whatever. Ideally, what we need to build consensus so everyone opts in, or as close as many total as possible, so people don't have to necessarily know where to go or not to go. Just in a district.
I agree to the point. I actually spent a lot of time talking to mayors from these municipalities about this. They had the same concerns. They went forward, 0 issues. I've since gone to several businesses downtown. Oh, Austin. What are we waiting for? We make decisions.
My thought, if I could respond about this, I long thought, once we do this, the Salem streetscape, I want to have that in place, this district, because I think people are going to like to walk around with the trees and benches and everything and enjoy themselves. I think I've become convinced, though, that doing it now helps us work out any kinks, that when we finally get that thing done, it'll already be rolling, and we'll have the stuff printed out, we'll have the cups and all that stuff squared away. And so I'm fine proceeding now with the planning of this.
And I want to add something too, with the construction coming up downtown. A lot of business owners they're nervous. And this is obviously for us to present a new initiative and trying to get people to come into downtown.
For what, to buy a drink and go into the street and
Sure.
they have nowhere to go?
No
Like,
one-
because there's no park to sit in, there's no benches on the street, there's no destination. You can take your drink and walk into another part with that drink. So like, what's the destination?
The stores initially,
Stores.
and it'll be more later.
I mean, I'm not opposed to a social district, I really am, but I just don't think that this is the time, or I propose more of a slow roll than going all in like overnight. And so I do think that, you know, having another conversation or survey with the business owners, you might be right. Like, you know, maybe you canvass them all and everybody's on board right now, which makes this a short conversation then. But, you know, to increase the buy-in, because, you know, less than a year ago or about a year ago, it was 50-50, right? And so, you know, do we really think that things have changed that drastically from a store owner point of view? Like,
I don't. I think it'll be the same result, and it'll be muddled.
Well, I remember the conversations, and legitimately, some people who were opposed to it have left. Right?
Right.
Like,
Maybe a little bit
there's
different
people.
result.
So we make it a different result, but all I'm asking, like, I'm in favor of it. I just want to do, I want to do the homework of making sure we get the survey results and then going forward.
I do understand that, but we're going to be right back here. Dave's going to show something. Well, I don't know. I talked to the cap station owner, Pico Salem, Candace Pizza, Benny. They're ready to roll. So
but what about their tours? Like, you know, so
I talked
again,
to
like,
these stores. So they said that a few probably would participate, but they understand they would, you know, they could opt out. So I think that was some concerns of other mayors, and they went forward and they haven't had issues. So I'm just making on that. Is there a motion?
Second.
I'd like to amend the motion to do a survey starting as soon as we can to get the results.
Can you amend the motion? You want to do?
So you're going to amend your motion. So I was just saying, I wanted to recanvass the residents or the business owners in the social district to ask 2 questions. 1, are you in favor personally? And 2, even if you're not in favor and we're inactive, would you opt in or opt out? 2 questions.
So that delays it more time. What are we waiting on?
What's the rush?
The rush is.
Everybody else is doing it.
4 years is the rush. So make a decision.
I mean, do you want to tie our proceeding to the result? And do we have metrics now that you want to say, independent of what what they're going to say is like, if we get more than 55%, we're going to do it?
We did this before. We did the survey.
Yes.
We stopped it because of the results of the survey. And that was 12 months ago or 14 months ago.
But we stopped it because no one wanted to make a decision because it's.
Because the people told us they weren't gonna opt in. They said, we're not gonna opt in.
Yes.
It's not gonna be.
Those same folks will
And that's
not
what
opt
the
in
survey
again.
is for. Come to tell us now it's different. We're gonna do it differently.
How old was that survey?
The last one was done in June of 2023.
Well,
We could be done in 1 month. We do the survey over the holidays, first meeting in January, say, here it is. People are in favor of it, now let's do it. But I think it's a bad look for us to go forward after they told us they didn't want to do it, and just go forward without asking them again.
well, they told us 55% wanted to, 35% did not, right?
That's not a high number, right about that. Like if it was 75 or 80, it's pretty high. But if half the street is closed, doesn't want to do it. I had business owners telling me, who sold alcohol, like, why would I opt into this? I want people to stay in my establishment to drink and buy more alcohol from me. Explain to me why I should sell stuff. I want them to stay here. I don't have a good answer to that.
Let me break it down side by side. When we were deciding on construction for the parking mitigation, we had data right in front of us and people said, we want to wait until January. You're ready to press the gas then. And those downtown businesses speaking up. But what's changed?
They can opt out of this.
They can't opt out of this, exactly.
And if we have a situation where everyone opts out and create a social district no one opts into, we create the
That's not gonna, yeah, that can go all day long. We need to move forward.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
That is aye. Motion carries.
Right.
All right, any other bid? Thank you, everyone.
Thumbs up. I feel like we have-
I wish I could be in the non-losing side of a vote for once. I'm pretty sure I'm by far the most losing vote person.
Appreciate it.